Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Business Spotlight. I'm your host, Todd Rodden. I'm a certified business and executive coach. I own Aspire Action Coach here in the Dayton, Ohio area. And I think you're going to find this interview very insightful today. We're meeting with Tyler Davis. Tyler is the owner, he's also a CPA, but the owner of Davis Accounting and Tax, serving business owners and businesses throughout the region here. I think you're going to love his journey and also his insights from working with countless other businesses as well. For those first-time viewers, we're thrilled to have you. We encourage you to hit the subscribe button so you can receive future messages like you're going to receive from Tyler here today. So without further ado, Tyler Davis, Davis Accounting and Tax, take a minute. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your business and why accounting and tax.
Yeah. So Tyler, you got the name. Really, the business kind of bloomed into primarily serving business owners with both accounting and tax. Right, it's in the name. We really found that that combination is really fruitful for our clients. Just because I've seen it kind of both ways, where we had a client where we just did tax, or if we had a client that we just did accounting work. Having those two together lets us kind of give a lot more advisory level services. We actually understand what's going on with their books, and then that leads to good tax planning. That's just a little bit of a nutshell. I'm sure we'll get into it more in the future, but a bit about me. I'm just up the 75 corridor from Dayton and Sidney. My background, it kind of goes a little bit kind of all over the place in terms of accounting. I really started in cost accounting roles for manufacturers. So, kind of that nuts and bolts, price per part kind of analysis for manufacturers. And then I spent some time as well in an auditing role where you're looking at basically really zoomed out look at the books and looking to see if financial statements are presented fairly. And then also in some leadership CFO style roles where we're starting to look more executively and how the finances kind of lead organizations. And that's kind of all funneled into an experience here now where, my favorite type of way to help a client is to kind of get zoomed out and really look at what their finances are doing for their business, not only just to save on tax or to let them know what to pay for tax, but to actually make business decisions based on the numbers, because the data is all there in the accounting. It just kind of has to be set up right and done right.
A great background, and I love that. Hey, you've got not only the roll up your sleeves, nuts and bolts level, but the much more strategic view. And it's as you mentioned, spot on. Far too easy for business owners to kind of get lost in the details and they step back. Are you asking yourself the critical strategic questions, especially when it comes to your financial decisions and investments and how you're going to pivot? Um, Take a minute, kind of build upon that. Who are your ideal customers? So someone who's listening here say, hey, that might be a great fit for your services.
Yeah, typically what we find, like the area that we can help the best is, I think the typical, and I'm sure you've seen this, the typical journey for a business, especially as they grow, is that they typically have one of their first hires being someone who's like an admin or an office manager of some sort. And typically, shout out to all my office managers out there, they're like holding up the back of accounting and bookkeeping in America. But typically, they have a big chunk of responsibility in terms of keeping some level of books for that business owner. And then that gets pushed over to a tax accountant in the spring, and taxes are generated. And I see a lot of different things from business owners where some are trying to use their books to make business decisions, but a lot of them are just merely doing it for tax compliance. So where we really, really like to help and see a lot of value is when we can come in and kind of take charge of those books and give back time to the admin to do more customer facing type activities. And we can actually make the bookkeeping set up in a way that kind of tells a story about the business, because that's really what accounting is supposed to be. It's really hard for business owners to read a set of financials and put together a story. But what we try to do is translate that for them so we can actually look at these financials that are being created and make actionable decisions based on the direction of the business. So we love to do that, and then we love to tie it together with tax planning, because typically speaking, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is that the personal lives of these owners and their personal financial situations blends together with the business, and it's kind of one big cohesive unit. So we like to tag that along with it so that the business is able to generate the cash flow for the tax payments required, and also just give a little bit more ammo to those business owners on making decisions that may impact tax, because we just don't want anyone operating in the blind.
Yeah. All I can say is amen, brother, to that. It's far too common. You see that, especially earlier on in their journey, they've got somebody they know or an admin person who may know a little bit about accounting. They took an accounting class at one point in time. So they're getting by, but because they don't have, sound numbers, they're not on top of it. They're not consistent with it. They don't know what the story is really telling them. They're missing key business decisions and really can take them down some difficult paths, right? That take a while to overcome if they, just invest a little more and got that right advice consistently, like you're talking about. You talked a little bit the blend of the accounting and the tax, also a little bit of the personal as well as aligning the business. What else you think makes your firm unique?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that we try to be highly customized for the client. So, I sit on all the sales calls and kind of just the, onboarding of a client, and I want to make sure I get a keen understanding of the problems that they're having. So then I can help translate on how the accounting can actually solve that problem. Because I mean, clearly in the industry, there's just strictly compliance items that need to happen. I need books for my taxes. I need my tax return filed. I need to do sales tax, et cetera, et cetera. But what we're talking about here that kind of sets us apart is actually taking the time to understand what you're trying to get out of that information, or assisting you with problems that you have where the financials can answer them, and customizing the bookkeeping in a way that's readable by the client, so that they're not just staring at it and just not understanding what's going on, but pulling out data, whether it's KPIs or just reformatting it so that they can make accurate business decisions based on that data quickly. And it's less of a maze in general.
You talked about your background, great background experience, especially manufacturing experience. Is there a certain industry you tend to focus on at Davis, or you serve a broader clientele?
We're somewhat broad. We're not nailed down to one specific industry, but it's more or less small businesses that are kind of hitting that tipping point that we talked about before, where have grown to the size where they do have some employees, but they're really struggling to make like future decisions, and they just need that little bit of additional skill to come in and take a look at the accounting side. And we really look at it as a comparable to hiring, or maybe a more affordable option than hiring, because you can take a look at what we can provide and handle basically all the accounting of a business in a really strong way with some really good experience behind it, but typically at a fraction of the cost of actually hiring someone to do that. Also, then the idea is that you may be able to free up that office manager or whoever else is doing that to get them, because they're like, most of the time what we see is very integral to the business. Like they mean a lot to that business and they really stand it up. So if there are other areas in the business that are more impactful for them rather than kind of nose down in the books, we see a lot of value there. So you typically see businesses, once they approach north of 500,000 a year in revenue, $1 million a year in revenue, and kind of scaling up close to 10, where we're a real good sweet spot for them, because once they get to a significant size, then they're probably considering making that full-time hire of like a controller or an accounting manager. And they may have a lot of very industry specific tools that they want that person eyes on all the time. So that's that sweet spot. The areas that we typically don't focus on, although I said manufacturing, I had some of that background. We don't do a lot with manufacturers simply because they have a lot of work to do with inventory. They have very significant like ERP systems. And we're not ERP consultants. It's just not our jam, right? So we typically are with service-based like businesses for the most part.
I'm interested in how have you found ways to grow? What have been your best marketing strategies to get that next client?
So we talked off camera on this, but I'm a co-host on another podcast called the Next Gen Strategies podcast, and we actually just got done shooting an episode kind of about this topic. I'm blessed to actually have a marketing gentleman who does the podcast with me. So I'm far from a marketer expert. But one area that I've seen repeatedly, especially in like that road to $1 million in revenue, is just leveraging relationships and partnerships with people in your network or other business owners to help get you there. I think that's a huge thing that is helpful for those early businesses and even ongoing, don't get me wrong, because it is what I like about it is it's darn near free, right? I mean, it's really just putting boots to the ground and attending network events or using LinkedIn and connecting with people and trying to find and leverage relationships with typically businesses that serve the same client profile that you do and just getting your name out there and understand that's what you're doing and maybe finding some alignment with them. Maybe there's something where you have some of the same values or something like that. And that's been really fruitful for me is just to continuously make connections with individuals because I think everyone is always looking to be helpful to their current clients. And if they have somebody in their back pocket that can help their client, that makes them look good. And it's just one of those things where people just want to help other people.
Well, it's very powerful for your client relationship when you can provide them access to other service providers that solve other problems, other challenges that they have. I'm curious to build upon that. You talked about, other companies, businesses that have a similar client profile. They're serving similar clients. So who would be those types of businesses for you?
Yeah, typically you would look at like, let's say IT businesses, like managed service providers. You would see attorneys. You would see people that are in kind of the insurance space, kind of those business-related service businesses typically stand out a lot. Sometimes there's a new thing that's really propped up in the last few years, and those are fractional services. So you'll see people who are in leadership roles like CFOs, COOs, like operating officers, marketing officers, and they like to come in businesses and very specifically serve in that kind of executive role. And those can be good too because they don't do the kind of nitty-gritty down to the detail work. They just want to advise from a higher level. So those can be good partnerships as well in our field.
All right. Well, kind of shifting gears here now, talking about some of the growth strategies. Any entrepreneurial journey, it's got some twists and turns, got some hills and some valleys. Maybe share with us a key roadblock you've had in the last few years.
Roadblock
Roadblock
for sure is just myself. And that's an existing roadblock. So your typical, I mean, I'm an accountant, right? So typical kind of stereotypical accountant is low risk, introverted, right? Those types of things. And I never saw myself as an entrepreneur in high school, through college, early into my career. It just never really made sense, mainly because of risk aversion. So I think there are probably lots of people out there like that, especially when you're in, accounting is a safe decision for a career, right? Everyone needs accountants. There's a plethora of corporate jobs and government jobs and small business jobs and big CPA firms, small CPA firms. So it can be very challenging to kind of bet on yourself or even just put yourself out there. A lot has changed for me. My co-host on the podcast likes to make fun of me for it because he's like, you're the most talkative CPA that I know. So a lot has changed over the years that has made that much easier for me to just get out and network and be sociable and kind of not have fear of risk. But it is still a current challenge for sure. It's one of those things that kind of just lingers in the back of your brain that you have to gut check every once in a while.
So any tools you found helpful in that? Hey, a lot of folks tend to be more introverted. Hey, yours truly as well. I'm curious how you get through that.
Well, I think I just had a misperception on what introverted meant. Like I think introverted in my brain 10 years ago meant that I just didn't like people. And then that wasn't the case. I think my best definition of it is that an introvert recharges their batteries by having some time alone. But that doesn't mean that you can't, get out there a lot. So what I found the biggest tool for me is just to go into awkward scenarios and awkward situations because it's like working out. It's like training a muscle. And after a while, it's no big deal at all. And then I can still go, come down in my spreadsheets and recharge whenever I need to.
Always remember, like we're going into a crowd of all the strangers. They, you know, all they can ever do is tell you no. They can't eat you or anything like that,
No.
right?
And people
But
respond so much to, I think everybody gets in their own head sometimes, especially when you go to like the little social or the networking event, and you're clung to your little corner. And I'm like, everybody's there to talk to other people, right?
yeah.
Like, no one's judging. Like, people respond so well to if you just go up and say, "Hey, I'm Tyler. What do you do?" And I think the other thing, tools wise, is read some books. There are a lot of books out there that can help with this, but I think I'm trying to remember exactly if it was it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. One section of that book, I think it was really important to me, was just the portion about how, when you talk to other people, you talk about them, and you really care about what they have going on, because people want to elaborate on their situations. And I found that to be really helpful, to just genuinely care about what's going on in other people's lives, and ask them. And it kind of breaks the ice, and leads to some really good friendships and colleagues out there.
Great. So that's something in the past. What's a current challenge that you have, kind of looking out the front window of the car here?
Yeah, the challenge that I think probably myself and other CPAs are faced with is that there is a immense amount of work available, because there is a shortage with CPAs right now. But the thing that we have to focus on is that since there is a shortage of CPAs, it's hard to have help to do those things. And it's very easy to onboard a lot of clients who just need a tax return done. But you can very quickly get into a situation where you're overburdened with work, and your customer experience and your customer service really falls off. And I'm sure anybody that's listened to this has had experience with CPAs before, is that some are awesome and amazing. And I will say that most of them are in general, but lack of communication tends to come up as a gripe that clients have, with past experiences. And I'm kind of here to say, like, that tends to happen because CPAs are getting so overburdened with their workload that they lack the time to actually give that communication and customer service to their clients. So I think that's the biggest thing right now, for us, is really focusing on smart growth in a way that preserves the communication standards that we have in place in the customer experience.
Okay, good. No, great example. I appreciate the specifics there. So as you look to the future, right, as you unlock some of those challenges you just talked about here, what's your dream for the business, say 3-5 years down the road?
Yeah, I think the dream is to be integrated as an advisor for basically all of our clients, because we both know that there is some rapid development in technology, and will continue to be very significant in probably the next 5 years, especially in the accounting space. There's no reason to believe that with the power of AI, a lot of the nitty gritty will be handled in some automated format. But I think the same problems will persist for business owners in terms of getting the customization that they need to actually make business decisions. So I think the dream is that, really the technology frees up the time of CPAs like me to actually deliver more advisory services to clients. Like, that's the foundation of our business, and that's what we want to continue to do, is more and more have more time for clients to actually give them actionable insights about their numbers, and have it, set up in a way that kind of fulfills that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is going to be hopefully the modern way of accounting assistance for clients in the future.
So how are you preparing yourself and the firm for that?
So the big thing, I think, is making sure we leverage technology as it exists. You'll see in the field that there are a lot of accountants that are like clutching on to something like QuickBooks Desktop with like an iron fist, because that's the way they know how to do it, and it works in their systems. And what we look at doing is making sure we're utilizing kind of the most current tech, because that is where all of these big advancements will happen. And we want to make sure that we're the expert in it, so we can advise on it and also set it up for clients. And realistically, if you think about the average engagement that we may have, where we are doing bookkeeping plus we are doing some tax planning. If we can reduce the amount of time it takes us to do bookkeeping because of those tools that exist, that gives us more time to give to customizing and giving better advisory to the client. And I think that's the vision for us, not to hold on, you know, to an existing thing because that's what we know how to do. It's to continuously learn more about how to kind of address the individualized problems business owners have.
So that leads right into team. Right? You talked about there is a shortage of CPAs just in
Yeah.
general in the market. So it's got to be a challenge for you to have, staffing, as you mentioned. But as you think through kind of that pivot over time from less of the work being the day to day to more of the advisory. So how do you think about the team going forward and preparing for that?
It's going to be, for our firm, and there'll be different firms out there that really hyper specialize in like certain areas. But for us, I think it's going to take more and more of a generalized kind of business acumen. Like you need your foundation of understanding how accounting works, but it's going to require of us more of an understanding of how businesses make decisions based on their finances. It is very hard right now to find very good tax CPAs. And I'm not all that far removed from what it was like to go through college and kind of the expectations coming through there. So just for general information, it's interesting, I think, is that, when you go to a typical state college in accounting, the big push says, hey, the best students here go to a big giant CPA firm and it's kind of like law. You grind it out and then you make an exit into something else. I think there's opportunity, especially with how the general consensus of college amongst the public has changed. There's opportunity to target kids coming out of high school and explaining to them what type of impact they could have even locally, and actually kind of letting them jump right into the action and having them go through school at the same time, kind of like an apprenticeship. And you're from the start, you could have someone who, by the time they finish their degree, has 4 years of experience with your firm, has 4 years of experience with your clients, understands them more, and they're going to be a really big part of your team. And I think that's more or less the team members you're going to be looking for, rather than somebody who's just does a bang up job on 1065 partnership returns. Because I'm hopeful too the technology will assist with that. An example of this, I just got asked by our local workforce partnership to go talk about accounting to a class of high school students. So I'm hopefully going to take that as an opportunity to maybe drop some knowledge about what it looks like, because accounting is a great industry for entrepreneurs. Like you can pretty much hang up a sign on your house and start a business. It's one of those areas that if you go down the typical track, you're working for a giant conglomerate business. And there's just a lot of opportunity there to talk to the youth and show that like this is not a thing where you're going to be hunkered behind a spreadsheet all the time. I think in the future it's going to be more FaceTime with clients, more Zoom calls, things like we're doing right now.
So as we've got a lot of viewers to the series that tend to be newer in their journey as an entrepreneur as well. So given what you've learned, what would be your advice to them as they're starting out, or the advice you wish you had when you started out a few years ago?
I think the biggest one for every single business owner is to understand how you price. Whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling a service, whatever that you're doing, when you are starting out on an entrepreneur journey, it's very easy for you to underprice for multiple reasons. One being that you just want to acquire clients, and beating everyone on price is one way to do that. And another being, if you're just, I think we had an example of this on our podcast, like say you're an electrician and you make $30 an hour right now as an employee. You think that you can go out and start doing those services for $50 an hour as your own boss and be profitable. And you're like, dang, I'm making $50 an hour. And you'll soon realize that that is not enough to run a sustainable business. So you can kind of run yourself into a trap where you are so busy, and I'm sure you've seen this before, you're so busy and you don't have any time to kind of fix your pricing, and it's a really big mess. So I think really thinking through your business plan on what what type of service or product that you make is, and how to examine your pricing to make a long sustainable business, because at some point you might need to hire. All these things kind of go into the calculations, and you got to have the margins to support that.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, there's multiple dimensions to that, but yeah, you
Yeah.
see it far too commonly where they, to get every job they can win, right? They underprice themselves, and then they basically are working themselves to death, but not making any money. They can't hire. They kind of feel painted in a corner, right? And getting real about your pricing is one of the key ways to kind of
And
free
it's
yourself.
hard. It's hard. I mean, I have a dozen examples of, the older couple that just really needs a tax return done, and it tugs on your heartstrings, and the things that I've told myself and other clients too is that, you think what you do is like the best, right? You're giving the best value, like you really care about it. And if you don't do your pricing right, you will cease to exist, and you won't actually be able to give that to those folks.
Yeah.
So it's just a different way of framing your mind. You have to get to the point where you have sustainable profits to sustain your livelihood before you can start thinking about how to help people in need, you know?
Mhm. So Tyler, as we look to wrap up here today, what's the best ways for folks to stay connected with you, to follow Davis Accounting and Tax, and or your podcast as well?
Yeah, you could find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Davis. You could also find the podcast Next Gen Strategies podcast. That's out there on LinkedIn. It's also on YouTube, and then on all of the major podcasting platforms. That's a really good one because you kind of get the off the cuff, you know, thoughts from a CPA and a general business podcast. And it's really where I spend a lot of the time kind of putting out content is Next Gen Strategies podcast. And then if you just want to check out our business, you can jump out online and go to datcpa.net. That's a good place just to kind of see, and our contact information is out there.
All right. So Tyler, as we wrap, what are you inspired by today?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I'm inspired about the future. I think, we live in a time right now where people are kind of nervous and tense about, and timing, right? We just had an election. People are just nervous and tense about what's coming. And I think I'm excited about the future because I think we're going to have some very significant changes with technology. And I'm one of the big people who I'm just trying to figure out how to leverage that day to day and use it to help more people or help people more, I guess. So I'm kind of inspired by that because I think there's a lot of opportunity for people like accountants to get more meaning out of their work. I'm friends with a lot of accountants, and it can be kind of a grind for some of them because they are so bogged down in just manual processes. So I think that it's really going to open up opportunity to use your accountant brain in ways that drive a lot of impact and value, and leverage tools to help you do that.
So, love that. I love that spirit, that mindset of embracing change that's
Yeah.
coming, and how can you use it to help more people and to be more successful. Far too often you see people kind of they want to hang on to the
Yeah.
status quo. You mentioned that yeah, yourself. So Tyler Davis, thank you for sharing your story. A lot of great lessons learned for our viewers here today, and I'm excited to see the continued growth for you and your tax and accounting firm in the region.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate being able to be on the podcast. It's been fun.
Yeah. All right. And our viewers, we're thrilled to have you join us here today as well. Again, reminder, hit the like button as you enjoyed this session here with Tyler Davis. And again, reminder, if you haven't, hit that subscribe button so you can receive future messages. And with that, we thank you all for watching and have a terrific day.